even from 1962 onward, when we really became serious of the need for having a strong military, our defense budget has seen ups only when there has been a crisis. What more worrying is the fact that they have also deployed their surveillance and radar elements forward. To my mind, this is a grey zone activity. It's an activity to deter India from not undertaking any steps such as what we did in Kailash range, etc. Why can't we extend our reach? If you make that Andaman Nicobar into a formidable base, then you don't have to bother about Humban Totas and the Malacca Strait. The Chinese trying to exploit the strait in the South China Sea or in the Indian Ocean region. I would like to go a step further and say that Andaman and Nicobar Islands and Lakshadweep should become our static aircraft carriers. What are the options available now for Imran Khan? Either to lean on the Allah or lean on the army.
Hello and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Adi Achint. Today I have with me Lieutenant General Dushyant Singh, who is going to talk to us about India's step forward with China and Pakistan. Lieutenant General Dushyant Singh, PDSM, ABSM, was commissioned into the 9th Battalion of the Maratha Light Infantry in December 1981. Commanded a corps in Punjab, was the Chief of Staff of the Eastern Sector. He holds the distinction of having served twice in the NSG, one as the Deputy Inspector General and second as the Inspector General. Thank you, sir, for agreeing to having this chat with me, and especially after the last video, which received some very good comments. Me, along with a lot of other people, are quite eager to hear your views on this particular subject.
Thank you, Adi. It's good to see you back again, and very good evening to the viewers.
To you as well, sir. So I'll start off with, of course, previously our favorite topic of the Indian Armed Forces was always Pakistan, but I'm going to make mine Chinese. Where do you think the whole situation with the Chinese is heading, considering a couple of things that have happened in the near past? One is the deployment of long-range missiles at close proximity to the line of control. Second is the trespassing, if I may use the word, of Chinese ships carrying nuclear material in the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka. And the third point is the failure, one can put it as a failure of the Corps Commander talks which happened recently in Ladakh, sir.
Well, Adi, as far as the three issues which you raised, firstly is the deployment of long-range missiles. Basically, these are new weapons developed by China. They fire two types of rockets. One has got a range of 500 and the second one has got a range of about 350 or so. Now, one of them is a naval version. So we should discount the naval version. That would be more applicable. That 500 kilometer one is a naval version. The other one, which is 350, that is the one which we should be worried about. So from where they are deployed, they can reach, cover the entire Ladakh region. So it's a point of worry as far as we are concerned. But more worrying is the fact that they have also deployed their surveillance and radar elements forward. Now that gives them a real-time coverage of the area over us, right? So the sensor-shooter link in their case is well established. Also, a few days back, we had heard the news that the artillery components were deployed in this area and they carried out their military exercises and firing of these weapons. Now, so as far as this, sometimes they used to call this as a mystery weapon. Last year, in 2019, when it was first time paraded in their Republic Day parade of China, it has the capability to be guided on in real time. And since they have the sensor shooter link now established or deployed opposite us, it is definitely a point of worry for us. But I should also like to remind you the statement of our Air Chief, Air Chief Marshal Bhaduria, who said that they are cognizant of this fact and they have taken actions suitable to negate such a possibility. So we do have the response, but I would be more happier if we had a ground response as well, similar to what the Chinese have put in front of us. We do have an equivalent called Pinakas, but their numbers are currently less. We had sanctioned some more of them, but that's a different issue. More importantly, we need the surveillance element. That is where we are as of today. Lacking, we need our UAVs. We need our UAVs to make that shooter sensor link complete, so that we can also respond from the ground equally well as the Chinese are now capable of doing it. But we do have the options for that. To my mind, this is a gray zone activity. It's an activity to deter India from not undertaking any steps such as what we did in Kailash range, etc. So, till the time we are prepared, I think we should not worry about this. And this is the trajectory which we are going to see in the future. It will be jostling along the borders and the talks both going together. The Chinese, as I had said earlier, also are not very keen on resolving the boundary issue.
Hmm.
They would like this to continue to simmer as it is, so that they have a leverage with India to engage us in activities which divert our attention from our economic trajectory. So that is as far as your first question is concerned. Regarding Humban Tota, this was expected. This is on an expected line when they started having these bases in Djibouti, Gwadar, and then Humban Tota, and then you have come in Thailand also. So they are having these strings of port facilities, and they are not meant to be just kept there without any purpose. So they would be used by the Chinese. We have to be careful. We have to monitor their movements, and I'm sure our navy is capable of monitoring these ships which are coming, and they would be prepared for any adverse action which these Chinese ships may undertake. So both of these are a cause of worry, but till the time our intelligence is good, till the time we are able to cover these areas, I think we should be fine with that. We should be able to take care of these threats.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
Yeah.
So,
I will not say anything more than that.
what about the third part, sir? The failure of the 11th Corps Commander.
I said I said the Chinese are not keen as of now to resolve the boundary issue.
Absolutely. So a follow-up on that is what I wanted to ask you, sir. See, one of the things a lot of people talk about is the long supply lines, although very well developed supply lines for the Chinese, which are coming in
Yeah.
from, let's say Lhasa for that matter.
Yeah.
They are long, but they are developed really well. But it does require a lot of effort on the Chinese part to supply their troops in the region that they're sitting in. You also mentioned the point that this is a deterrence towards India to make sure that India does not conduct any activity like the Kailash range or something like that. Although not much news is coming out from there, do you think there's also a possibility that we are also trying to keep them engaged so that we can also put the pressure back on them, getting our forces ready, the strike force or whatever needs to be done operationally by the Indian Army? Is there some sort of a possibility wherein we are also playing the game so that we can keep this thing alive and keep the world pressure on the Chinese?
Well, as far as the Indian side is concerned, we have a definite edge at the tactical level, in the sense that our troops are already there, very close to the line of actual control,
Yes, sir.
both in the eastern as well as in the Ladakh sector. So, as far as our territorial integrity is concerned, I think we should be able to take care of it, especially after Galman. The troops have withdrawn on both sides to their locations, which was agreed upon by both the parties. But both have the capability to get back to the fronts. As far as India's preparation for dealing with such activities are concerned, like the deployment of missiles, which the Chinese have done, We also have, uh, as per some reports which I have got, we also have our reactions in place. Whether we are able to match missile to missile, that's a different issue. But what I'm trying to say is that India will not be found wanting, and our leadership should be capable of dealing with it, especially after having seen what uh, the Chinese did. The trust level is absolutely zero
Hmm.
as of today. So it will be unlikely that Indian armed forces will be trusting the Chinese as far as their military activities are concerned. We want the peace also for our economic development, our economic growth. We don't want a negative year growth second time round. I think that would be the death nail. It will cause us more damage to our ambition of having a strong military. Unless we get the GDP going at 1.5% of GDP, we are not going to grow much
Hmm.
military.
Hmm.
So we need to increase our GDP, and then only we will be able to develop our military power.
So, um, the Chinese in the past some time has stated with no simple regrets to the fact of, listen, we are your enemy now. That thought process in India was not very common amongst the general populace, not openly discussed. How do you think we should, change our attitude towards China as the political class or the diplomatic class or the military is concerned? What do you think? What are the changes that you'd like to see happening in the next some time in our dealings with China themselves?
Uh, I'll briefly cover as to what has been our relations over a period of time as far as India and China are concerned. See, till about 19th century, both had a relationship of indifference, right? We were connected with each other in terms of culturally. Travelers used to go across. The Chinese had the stories of Kumar Jiva and Bodhidharma
Hmm.
in their country. So we had the Indian influence in China, and likewise the Chinese travelers had come to India. There was a trade which was going on between in India and China, but nothing at the political level, nothing for a geopolitical competition was there between India and China. It was only when India became British India and Indian troops started going all over the world, including China, during that century of humiliation. They saw India as an appendage of British India. From then on, their attitude towards India started, in my view, started changing. And post independence, after a brief period of bonhomie, which was created because of Jawaharlal Nehru, peace, friendship, peaceful coexistence, Panchsheel, etc. Uh, in 1962, I think they taught us a lesson, and it was good that they taught us a lesson because we then realized that in this is a real world. It's
Hmm.
not an ideal world, and we have to fend for ourselves. And since then, I think we did try to grow militarily, economically, and took a different trajectory. Uh, so the period between 1962 to 1988, I would define it as a period of neither hostility, but nor there was any high level of peace.
Hmm.
But from 1988, when Rajiv Gandhi visited China, I think there was a breakthrough in the relations, and we saw a period of confidence building measures, border agreements, 1993, etc. So 5 of them, and we saw a period of peaceful coexistence and economic development. Both the countries during that period were at the same level of, incidentally, this will be very interesting, at the same level of economic prosperity or GDP, whatever you want to call it. In fact, India was better internationally connected than China with the world economy. But both agreed to keep the borders quiet and focus their attentions on the respective economies. We also liberalized, they also opened up, and the end result by the time it was 2010-11 was that they were at 14.5 trillion and we are at 2.9 trillion or 2.5 trillion. That was the then our economy. So what I'm gathering was that was that period of peaceful coexistence. Then suddenly things started changing. 2013 onward, then we started having Chumar, Depsang, Doklam, and now Galwan. So there is a surface calm which is, prevailing between the two countries. And after 2020, we should dispense with this idea, in my view, that we are going to have a spell of peaceful relations with China. It will be a relationship where both will be jostling for space in economic as well as regional space and global space also. But they will try to keep the hostilities to a very, very low level through these talks so that they get the space to economically continue to grow. As I had said in my last video, China has the aim of becoming a superpower by 2049. That will be the 100th year of, and India also wishes and should wish to be a significant regional power at least in the times to come. So for both, you require economies to grow, and I think this would be the future trajectory as far as India China are concerned. So we will see competition, we will see low level salami slicing type of conflicts, we will see jostling for space in the seas, whether it is the South China Sea or whether it is the Indian Ocean region, and we will also see a certain amount of cooperation in the global commons area where things affect everyone like climate change, etc. You may see some cooperation there. Economically, we will have the most tough time. From a 200 million trade which was there around the 90s, we have reached a trade of 100 billion. 100 billion, almost 100 billion in 2019. 2020 we had a kind of a face off, so I think there would be a drop. But till 2019, it was around 100 billion, out of which bulk of it was in favor of China.
Yes.
So 69 billion or something like that. That was the trade which was done by China in terms of their exporting. So India was dependent on a lot of economic resources with China. This decoupling, although self-reliance call has been given, will be the most difficult challenge as far as India is concerned. Although there are other actors who have stepped in, which I can cover later if you want, who are trying to help India into decoupling with China for their own interests. It's basically the US companies which have now jumped in to replace the Chinese investment, especially in the digital areas. So this, in my view, will be the future as far as India China are concerned. We will see activities of this kind in the future. We have to learn with it.
Of course, I mean, when you put it across, it just seems like hot summers and very extremely cold winters in the borders. That something that we're going to experience. So one thing that comes out of your conversation is India needs to really relook its military strategy, its diplomatic strategy, and its people strategy, for that matter, towards China. You mentioned the drop in 2021. I believe it was somewhere around 10 to 12%, and that was pretty hard, especially with the app ban and stuff like that. It shows a change, but the problem in India is that we forget very fast. We've forgotten 26/11 that the Pakistanis did. We've forgotten everything around us. So unless and until the Chinese keep putting pressure on us, we will forget the fact that they are our enemy again. My question to you, sir, towards the government part of it, when we are looking at diplomacy, we are looking at various other factors that the government has in its hand to deal with the Chinese at the present moment with the kind of resources we have. Uh, what do you think should be the steps? That's part one, sir. Second part is India does carry certain trump cards that we've not used till now. Although covertly there is some action happening around the place, Tibet, Taiwan, so on and so forth. But there was a conversation with Taiwan that was made public, a little bit here and there, not very distinct. What do you think the whole discourse of the Indian government should be against this issue? So, because this China thing is not going to get over today, it will still need to be dealt with.
Um, my sense on this is that the government, I think, is playing the cards right. But what is important is the military reforms.
Hmm.
Unless we undertake the military and intelligence, both the reforms, actually, these are our two biggest weaknesses because of our neglect in the budgeting of defense over a period of time. I would say even from 1962 onward, when we really became serious of the need for having a strong military, our defense budget has seen ups only when there has been a crisis. You know,
Yeah.
62, so we had a jump. 71, we had a jump. Then we had a jump during Kargil. Then we have now had a minor, I won't say a jump, but a little bit of upswing when we went in for extra 20,000 crores
Hmm.
procurements post the Galvan incident. And now our budget is, actually speaking, there is no jump. If you add those 20,000 to the 1.1, which was allocated in the year 2020, it comes to the current allocation. So it's just been a 1.1% jump to our defense budget, which is somewhere affecting our military capability development. So therefore there is a need for military reforms. Do we need so many boots on ground? That is one big question.
Hmm.
Shouldn't we go in for an integrated theater command concept? There would be optimization of resources between the three services, and therefore there would be certain amount of economic savings which can be used for capital procurements. Then, from the intelligence perspective, uh, surveillance has been our major weaknesses. Number of military satellites which we have are far less as compared to the Chinese. We have to still depend a lot on international support for this. So I think the int reforms are also equally required so that we are not found wanting in our response. We need to be proactive when we are responding to the to any adversarial moves, which is what happened even during Galwan. It happened during Kargil. It's been repeated on, and we keep saying the same thing. I think we need to do something about it. So, first is the military reforms. Second is, I think we need to go in for the geographic theatre commands very fast. Unless we do that, we will continue to fight our own tough battles, army for army, air force for air force, and navy fighting its own battle in the south. I think we need to somehow integrate and start fighting world over. Armies have switched over. Only India has not.
Hmm.
Only India has not done so. We have started in a little way by announcing the Peninsular Command. I would like to go a step further and say that Andaman and Nicobar Islands and Lakshadweep should become our static aircraft carriers.
Yes.
But we still neglect these two. I mean, we have a command, so to say, in the Andaman Nicobar, but see the resources which they have. Why can't we extend our reach? If you make that Andaman Nicobar into a formidable base, then we don't have to bother about Humban Totas and the Malacca Strait. I mean, the Chinese trying to exploit
Hmm.
the straits in the South China Sea or in the Indian Ocean region. We need to start looking at things differently, and maybe we would be able to find answers to our budgetary problems. So the second is that we must go in for integrated theater commands. We should prepare for local conflicts. I think that's a reality, as I said. We now can't be I mean, lying on the resting on the fact that okay, the Chinese have gone back, so now we'll have a period of rest and recoup. No, I think our eyes and ears, human, we have resources with us. Those should be deployed constantly. I don't want to mention their names. They should be deployed constantly along the borders. Uh, and again, the related to this point is that contested borders, the control should be given to the military. We cannot have a border force under Ministry of Home, and bulk of the answerability goes to the Ministry of Defense or the armed forces. If something happens in along the Chinese border, it is the Indian armed forces which are answering. You call the CDS or you call the Indian Army Chief or the Air Chief to answer as to why this has happened.
Correct, sir.
You cannot have the ITBP singing its own separate tune. It has to be brought under operational control of the Indian Armed Forces. That's the biggest, I think, reform which we have to do. This must be done on priority. Let's for once forget this turf battle of Home Ministry and Ministry of Defense. Then gray zone. It is high time we should, I think, slowly, as the other nations are doing, as the other countries are doing, start using this weapon.
Yes.
If we can have a Red Eco Brigade attacking our power grid in Mumbai and putting the entire Mumbai in a blackout for 2 days, why can't we do the same to the cities across? It is a well-known fact that this was done by the Chinese cyber hackers. Why can't we do the same thing? So I think that is the next the step which we must do. We have to develop our offensive capabilities as well. If we are doing it, fine. If we are not doing it, I think we need to go in for it. Then in the South China Sea, the answer lies in partnerships. And today we have the ground for it. We have the Australians crying horse against the Chinese. We have the Vietnamese crying horse against the Chinese. The Indonesians are not happy with the Chinese. So we have Philippines are now showing their eyes to the Chinese. So we have ample amount of space for partnerships in the South China Sea to keep the Chinese always engaged, right? In addition to this, I think we should continue to isolate Pakistan, because we should not allow a China-Pak nexus to keep us engaged constantly. So the Pakistan policy, I think, is going well. We should continue to push it to a corner. Pakistan will not disappear. I mean, that fear of that it will break into pieces is not going to happen till the Pakistan army is there. They will take over whenever that kind of a fear comes in. They will take over, bring some law and order to the country, and they will again reinstate some puppet government, and the thing will continue to go. It's like the jelly, as Tara, she's a thinker, a strategic thinker, says. It's like a jelly, which will keep changing forms, but it will not disappear. The other things is that politically, yes, they are trying to, I think, work for the space for economic development. That's why they are not naming the Chinese in the manner the way you and me would like the government to name. But definitely, we should call full stop to our one China policy. We have enough leverages about Tibet within our own country, and it is high time. Like I said, we need to play the gray zone henceforth. We have been goody for a very long period. If they have announced that they are going to be our enemies, we can't just lying down and taking things. So we do have some cards up our sleeves which we should not hesitate in utilizing.
I think we need to get away from that whole thing. हमको शर्म आती है, वो क्या बोलेगा, and all that.
I think somewhere we chose a path of high table. Right when we got independence, we chose a path of a high table. Unfortunately, no one in this world is following high table. They are following high table only for the others.
Yes.
Even the Americans, when they give sermons about human rights, it's only for the others. not what they do when they do in what they do in Afghanistan.
Their own country for that matter.
Yeah, their own country. And when they use such levels of power, it pales in front of what we do in J&K.
Yes, sir.
We fight in J&K in the true spirit fighting one of our own people with our hands tied. We never raise the level of weapons to what the Americans do. So where is this thing about human rights, etc.? So I think this high table is for the others. For yourself, there is no high table. So we should also become realist. I am a very strong proponent of a realist theory.
So,
So I do not believe in the idealist theory that the world inherently is very good. I think that we are fooling ourselves. Okay.
absolutely. Sir, before I come down to Pakistan, one last thing that I'd like to ask you about China Pakistan. The development of this very big blast that took place in Quetta in one of these hotels, where allegedly a lot of people say the Chinese ambassador was there, some people say it's not there. What it shows to you that Pakistan is also going to become sort of an Achilles heel for the Chinese, combined with the action in Afghanistan, it's going to become an Achilles heel for the Chinese. And we have a big opportunity there to start draining the Chinese in that area to put more and more resources, if not boots on the ground, to protect their own interests. And that is something that we are seeing already. The kind of presence of the Chinese in their interest-based areas, various parts of the world, is pretty high. Do you think it's the right time with the current flux in Pakistan for us to start? If nothing else, I'm not saying any covert action or anything like that. I'm talking about just to talk about it, to give it a little fire.
I think we are already doing it the way we are treating Pakistan.
Hmm.
They may not be very open statements, but the fact that the Chinese have told Pakistan that they will send their own troops to defend the CPEC assets speaks of the level of now worry which the Chinese are having about their flagship project of BRI.
Yes.
The Australians have cancelled the BRI projects of their country.
Yes.
And Australia is not a small country.
Hmm.
Australia, although was a very close friend of China before the COVID pandemic, but after that, I think this has been the biggest statement which I heard that the Australians have cancelled their projects of BRI.
Yes. Hmm.
The Chinese are worried. If the CPEC fails, the dream of Xi Jinping would fail. And if the dream of Xi Jinping fails, Xi Jinping will lose the standing which he has in his country. That is the worry now for Xi Jinping. And therefore, Pakistan definitely now is becoming the Frankenstein monster which goes out of your control. Let's hope it happens. I wish it happens. I wish it happens because what will happen in that case is Afghanistan then becomes very critical for us, and our role in Afghanistan would become that much easier with the help of the Russians, with the help of the Iranians, and India together. If the Chinese see that their investments are going to, because after all, for Chinese, it's all about energy and outlet to the seas. They need an outlet, right? If Godar is becoming a failed mission, what do they do? So therefore, it would be good that if Pakistan is unable to push through the CPEC because of the security concerns, and the Chinese have to keep deploying their own troops. Nobody likes foreign troops on there.
Absolutely.
No country, leave alone a country like Pakistan, which is something similar to us, right? In terms of the composition of at least the top brass of the Indian Army, you will find that the only the Punjab line divides between the two. So it would be a assault on their sovereignty. If that happens, along with the groups like TLP, Tehrik-e-Labab, what it did, and French all going against the Pakistanis. I don't think US also will have much choice but to show the door to Pakistan even after they leave Afghanistan. So therefore, I think Pakistan should be diplomatically veered around to a state where they are isolated. As I said right in the beginning, we need to isolate Pakistan. China needs to be sent this message across that relying on Pakistan is not the best strategy which you can have, because ultimately, as I painted, Xi Jinping's survival would be at stake. And mind you, there were rumors about 3 years back of Xi Jinping being replaced.
Yes.
So that competition, when it comes within the CCP, we don't know. Especially if you start failing on fronts,
Mm. Mm.
you fail on these. You fail in South China Sea. You fail in Pakistan. You fail in the BRI, and lo behold, you are seeing you've done a crackdown on the Uyghurs. The Americans have come out very strongly against that very recently, just about a day back. They have issued a statement denouncing the Chinese. However, the Chinese may like to ignore this fact, but the world opinion does count, because ultimately it will have an effect on your trade, which you have with the EU and other countries which are closer to America than you.
Correct, sir.
So I, I feel it's a good development, and we should exploit it, especially in the context of Afghanistan.
Hmm. There is an opportunity for us to do something over there and probably increase our influence in the region.
Absolutely, I believe in the word. With the Chinese, Chinese don't have a two different words for threat and opportunity. In the English language, there is a word threat and there is a word opportunity. There are two different words.
Hmm.
In the Chinese, they have only one word, which is called Waichi, which means where there is threat, there is an opportunity. So the Chinese look at everything in this manner.
A little skewed, but it's interesting, sir.
So we should also look at things in that manner.
So moving on with Pakistan, where do you think the entire situation is headed? A lot of people are debating today, oh, Pakistan is just about to break and stuff like that. You mentioned about the fact that the army will not let that happen till the time it has the resources to do so. I personally feel this is a way for the army to get Imran Khan, moving out and put somebody else in his place, because he's kind of becoming a liability more than an asset now. His whole PR campaign, because of him being a cricketer, is not really working out. India, on that matter, one thing that we've seen is strategically we have kept quiet. We have not said anything out in the open, because once we do so, it may just result in a backlash for us. Where do you think things are headed, and how do you think we should handle it? Should we just stay quiet and just wait and watch what happens?
I think there's an old saying, when a building is crumbling, just stand and watch. So India is doing well to do that. If you happen to remove a brick here and there, quietly do it. Okay. Beyond that, I think let Imran Khan learn his lessons the harder way. Imagine he gives a speech in which he says that I endorse the view of Tehreek-e-Labab, but can we afford to oppose the French? So this is typically a statement of a person who has no option in front of him, because he is now struck between Allah and the army. The Allahs are baying for his blood, and the army is trying to find a, a way out to ensure that they take over the situation, bring another puppet regime, and win the and take the country forward. The rest of the army, in my view, army feels that they are the owners of Pakistan. So they have levied fine for anybody who says anything bad against the army. Some 5 lakh rupees. Now, have you ever heard in a country which supposedly says it's a democratic country, an army laying down such conditions.
Hmm.
If Indian army does this, there'll be next day people on the street. But it is happening in Pakistan. So who's in control? My point is, who is in control? It's the Pakistan army still remains in control. The radicals in the form of Tehreek-e-Labab, which is actually a political dispensation, uh, has shown its power that when required they can they can mobilize the entire people of Pakistan on the streets, and Imran Khan can do nothing about it.
Hmm.
Right. So, what are the options available now for Imran Khan? Either to lean on the Allah or lean on the army. Allah he can't, because Allah is dead against compromises. Allah doesn't have this good thing of negotiations.
Hmm.
For them, it is either my way or highway.
Correct. Hmm.
Now, if he says that army you take over, that would be the worst thing which Imran Khan can think of. I think Imran Khan is now caught in a situation where he's just seeing things go by past him. Otherwise, and in any case, that was going to happen. Imran Khan, before he got elected as prime minister, in the previous election, hardly won a seat.
Hmm.
Suddenly, next election, he sweeps entire Pakistan in the elections. Who has done this? Obviously, it's the army which has propped him up. So therefore, army is the one which is going to take him out. So in my view, Pakistan has its problems of Balochistan. It has its problems of Sindhustan. It has the problem in the northwest frontier. It has the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which continues to hobnob uh, along with the Talibanis across, and it's become a very, very powerful force as far as the terrorist activities are concerned in Pakistan. They continue to suffer because of this. So much so that the Pakistan's economic conditions become pitiable. Uh, the UAE is trying to somehow mediate between India and Pakistan to show some semblance of peace and stability in Pakistan, so that they can convince FATF that they are not supporting terrorist activities, so that they can get the IMF money. Whereas the Allah gang is saying that we can live without the aid of IMF or the World Bank.
Hmm.
So Pakistan is in a bad state. No denial on that. The only way, and the Chinese are mounting pressure on them as far as the CPEC is concerned. Chinese have huge loans given to Pakistan,
Yes.
and those are at much higher rates than the rates which the IMF has given. They have only few months to prove themselves in front of the FATF that look, they are very serious about the terrorist financing being stopped in Pakistan. So um, all in all, my view is this is the time we should not be seen actively in trying to get Pakistan down. What we should see to it is that the situation becomes such that Pakistan is unable to actually influence in Afghanistan, and then form our own strategy to control or to be a major stakeholder in Afghanistan vis-a-vis Pakistan when the Americans finally draw down from Afghanistan in September 2021. That should be our strategy. We should be looking beyond Pakistan. Pakistan today is not in a position to actually cause anything to us other than undertake those terrorist activities for which we should be prepared for. Because when you when a nation gets cornered, it wants some diversion. The only way the army can divert is by playing back into the two nation theory, which is that we Pakistan exists because of India. So if they do anything to India, that would divert the attention of the entire committee, and they would say, okay, we have done this in the favor of JNK, we have taken the revenge for Article 35A and 370. That is the narrative we should be careful of. What I said was that we should be careful of the fact that the Pakistan army should not stage a terror act against India in this kind of an internal situation which they are seeing, and divert the attention of their public towards the India-Pak confrontation over Jammu and Kashmir, feeding into the two-nation theory which we have, and we should be careful of this kind of orchestration. Our intelligence should continuously keep looking at these inputs if there are any. As far as the talks for, let's say, Indus Water Treaty, etc., are concerned, we should not block that. We should go ahead and have our. There is an ongoing talk going on between the two countries for Indus Water Treaty negotiations. So that we should carry on. I think we have no harm in doing so. We should not be seen as the obstruction to Pakistan's survival, right? Let them fall down on their own.
Correct. Sir. Interesting use of the words. I was actually hoping that you would use that word. You mentioned survival, and I'm sure you have your reasons behind that because of the
Yeah.
precarious position Pakistan is today, domestically and internationally, sir. And I personally agree with you. We should not be seen, even with a drop of oil in our hand somewhere. We have to look the other way. We have to keep on. I would say the Chinese not disengaging with us is going to be a good thing because we can tell the world, listen, this is where we are concentrating. We're not looking there right now. We've got a bigger boy on our shoulder right now. So I agree with you. It'll be in our favor that the Chinese stay on till the time either Pakistan goes to whatever dump it needs to go to or stabilizes itself. So you mentioned the peace talks as well. It's a very interesting time where a third country is trying to bring in some sort of a semblance of a talking atmosphere, and that's what the UAE says themselves, that we want the talks to go on. Let them not resolve anything, but let them start talking at least. What are the UAE's interest in this entire thing, considering the fact that the UAE, Dubai, and all these areas were throwing out Pakistanis from there? They've cancelled their visas, they've cancelled their renewals, a whole lot of stuff has happened. So, what is Dubai's interest or UAE's interest in this entire situation? That's point one. Point two is Pakistan being in turmoil is also a very dangerous situation for us on our borders. Because a desperate Pakistan, to my mind, for the lack of a better word, is a stupid Pakistan. And we've seen that multiple times. They will come up with some cockamamie plan and think that they're going to conquer the world. So what do you think about these two things, sir?
See, first of all, as far as UAE's motivation is concerned, I think UAE was a very good friend of Pakistan. Over a period of time, because of good diplomacy by India, and also the fact that Pakistan was not really, they were hobnobbing with Turkey. Turkey is kind of also vying for the caliphate, so-called caliphate leadership, whereas it's the Saudi Arabia which considers itself as the rightful leader of the caliphate or the Muslim world. So there is this power center conflict also. So UAE comes under the influence of Saudi Arabia. They're both the princes are very, very close friends.
Yes.
So therefore, once the UAE moved towards India, Saudi Arabia moved towards India. There was a lot of exchanges, and the bigger thing is the Pakistani economy was going nowhere, whereas the Indian economy was till 2019. Except for COVID, where we got derailed, our economy was actually growing fairly well. In
Yes.
fact, we were the largest growth as far as before in 2019. Our growth rate was the highest in the world.
Mm.
It was ahead of China.
Yes.
and UAE is deeply linked with India economically. So obviously, it has to pander to the Indian interest also. In this process, Pakistan somewhere got separated from UAE. I think there was some backdoor appeals uh, calling on the Muslim Muslim relationship between Pakistan and UAE. I mean, they both have a common religious denomination. Also, the fact that UAE does have linkages with Pakistan. It does have linkages with Pakistan. I don't wish to name there are big players of Pakistan also in UAE who are active. Uh, so UAE wanted some kind of a working relationship where its interests are not compromised. So whatever are the linkages with Pakistan and UAE, they should continue. For that, India and Pakistan would have to be not at loggerheads because they would have to choose then between India and Pakistan. And by nature, a nation will choose where the interests are greater. With India, the interests are much more vis-a-vis Pakistan at this stage. And mind you, India is today a pharmaceutical leader. Despite what is happening in our country, despite what we are going through, I think most of the world countries have gone through this stage. What we are going through now, we'll have to get out of this crisis, and God willing, we will get out of this crisis. Although we have made I would say we have made a mess of it. I think we could have been a little more better prepared. Without blaming anyone, without blaming the state government or the central government, I think the fault lies with every citizen, every government, and uh, every entity which is connected with COVID management, not to have foreseen this kind of a thing and prepared for it. But still, we have a place in this region. So UAE would not like a choice between India and Pakistan. Pakistan, because of its religious affinity, also the linkages which it has, traditional linkages which it has a large population of Pakistanis in UAE. So I think somewhere they have opted for and they have become a past master in underhand negotiations. You remember their negotiations with USA also have been of a similar nature. They signed a agreement with Israel. The
Yes.
US did with UAE and Israel, and with Saudi Arabia, it was almost done deal. But just before they signed, it was I mean Saudi Arabia and Israel were getting into an agreement. But just before that, Saudi Arabia developed a little cold feet. Maybe in times to come, they would probably patch up with Israel. So I think that was the motivation that a religious affinity, B, the fact that the Pakistanis are there in large numbers in UAE, they have their pressure groups and they would have worked to convince the prince to undertake this mediation. And we also want our space to carry on with our economic activities. That would have been our motivation. And we are also kind of assured that Pakistan, in any case, is going down the spiraling down as far as its internal situation is concerned. So there is no harm getting into an agreement like this without believing in Pakistani's intentions in the future. They don't make these agreements with any kind of seriousness. So that is that.
Some sort of a measure to balance the situation at the moment.
I would say yes. That's again. I think we are also looking at our economic situation of India, especially after the second wave, is going to become critical.
Yes.
Activities have come down very heavily as far as we were expecting a 11% growth. Now I have my serious doubts.
Absolutely.
We will have that 11% growth, which was predicted.
So, what about the threat that this entire destabilization in Pakistan poses to us? I'm talking about on the ground. I'm not talking about diplomacy, or I'm not talking about strategic value or anything like that. They're just human beings, a little, off their rocker in certain cases, ready and willing to come inside our country and have the similar kind of chaos, or so in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people through the borders if the situation does go bad. It's a tricky situation for us as well.
Uh, you have painted a picture which is, as of now, looks a very very long shot
Mhm.
of Pakistanis trying to come across the JNK borders or JNK line of control or elsewhere along our western borders. Uh, it is unlikely to happen.
Not the armies.
As
I'm
per,
talking about the influx of refugees, people running away from their.
I'm talking of that only. I'm
Okay.
talking of that only. I'm
Mhm.
talking of that only. Uh, a because refugees come normally refugees come where they are welcome, right?
Yeah.
With the Pakistani population, especially of the Punjab,
Mm.
and go a little further down towards Ganganagar, etc.
Mm.
They have a inherent narrative which has been built into them over a period of last 70 years of anti-Indianism.
True.
It is deeply ingrained in them.
Mm. Mm.
So refugee influx, if it is going to take place, it will not be this way. It will be UAE. It will be Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, no, because of the Iron Curtain which is there and the strict Sharia laws which are there in Saudi Arabia. But it will be countries in the West
Mm.
who should be worried. In the past, also, you've seen asylum seekers going west from the Muslim world. Afghanistanis, all the asylum seekers have gone to US, Europe, not to they have come to India, but only those people who have come to India who were traditionally connected with India.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
So in Pakistan, as of today, I can see certain amount of Hindu Pakistanis trying to come. That's why even in the past you have seen only the Hindu Pakistanis coming towards us. In
Yes.
fact, they keep appealing. They keep appealing. Please call us because we are being treated badly. The Christians might start coming, but even Christians, I've seen. I've been in the United States and I found a lot of Pakistani Christians settled there. Basically because of this, they have gone to other countries long time back. Those who are there, they are very poor to actually organize tickets and visa for themselves. That's why they are stuck in Pakistan. Otherwise, most of these people have actually migrated from Pakistan. It is almost a near Muslim country. Very few minorities are there which are left. So therefore, this influx towards India, I don't think it is in my view, I don't think it is going to take place unless there is a tyrant who comes and these guys have no place to go up but to, which is a very long shot in my
Oh,
view.
um,
And
I,
the army will not allow. An army will also not allow, I think.
I think I
Not
agree with
army.
you. Then there might be a lot of people running out of Pakistan, but for them to come into India,
No,
it's a very long shot. Fair enough, sir. And by the way that you've explained it, it's quite a possibility that they would try and go towards the other side, UAE, Qatar,
Europe,
Bahrain, some
Europe, Turkey,
Spain.
Spain, Belgium. These are now slowly becoming Muslim countries.
Of
Belgium is
course,
almost
absolutely, yes.
almost Muslim country. They will go to these places,
Mm.
not to France, of course. No, France is now becoming a little tough for them. But they
That'll,
actually went there.
that'll be the most interesting things. A Pakistani standing in the French embassy asylum there, the why हमारे घर में मार रहे हैं.
So that won't happen now. That won't happen now.
Sir,
But it will be public only.
mm. Sir, thank you so much for your time. This was a wonderful talk on the threat-based assessment of India's. Uh, yeah, well, I'm going to say enemies today. Pakistan is more of a nuisance than an enemy, and we've got a latest one that I think most of us Indians have realized, which is the Chinese. So, thank you so much for explaining the threat-based perceptions of and the future course of events that India can take to deal with these two major issues that we have in front of us. Just to all the viewers, I'm trying to pursue the general to talk to us about how we can protect our interests in this region as well, namely Afghanistan and so on and so forth. It's going to be a similar style of discussion where we will try and do a little bit of future gazing. Thank you, sir, for joining me once again, and I look forward for our next session, another time, another day, the topic as I mentioned.
Thank you, Adi.
Thank you, sir. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.